This Sunday, classified controversy. Attorney General Merrick Garland appoints a special counsel to investigate President Biden's handling of classified documents.
The extraordinary circumstances here require the appointment of a special counsel for this matter.
Just months after a special counsel was appointed to investigate Donald Trump, the Biden White House revealed classified documents were discovered in the president's private office and even in his private garage.
My Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay, so it's not like you're sitting out in the street.
Now the two 2024 rivals, the current president and the former president, are both facing criminal investigations. I'll talk to Rod Rosenstein, the former Trump Deputy Attorney General, who appointed a special counsel to investigate Russian interference. Plus, House Republican reset.
I think Congress has to investigate this.
After a rocky week, House Republicans unite around Biden's troubles and launch their very first investigation on the Biden documents, just as the White House struggles to answer new questions about the timeline of disclosure.
They suppress this information so that the American people don't have access to it as we're getting ready to decide who's going to be in office in the midterm election.
I'll speak with Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin and Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan. And Capitol attack. Protesters stormed Congress, outraged over the election results. The scenes in Brazil echoing the riot at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
It is evidence that what happens in the United States has repercussions around the world.
Was misinformation spread through social media by some of Trump's supporters to blame for creating this new threat to democracy in our Western Hemisphere? Joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson, the Reverend Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation on MSNBC, and Mark Short, former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history, this is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
Good Sunday morning. We often joke that a week is a lifetime in politics. Well, we just lived one of those weeks where we just had a lifetime. We are just 2 weeks into 2023. But it's already clear this year is going to be defined by a brutal and confrontational political climate with probably a lot of gridlock. What we don't know is how President Biden and Washington Republicans will look at the end of this year. But Biden, who a week ago was looking the strongest politically that he's looked in years, now finds himself on the defense. And congressional Republicans, who seemed likely to try to overreach, as Republicans did after the 1994 and 2010 elections, as well as their chaos in finding a speaker, have now been delivered a political gift. The classified documents discovered at Biden's private office in Washington on November 2nd, just 6 days before the midterm elections, only became public Monday because of mainstream news reports. And there's been a cascade of revelations ever since. Thursday, the White House acknowledged that more classified documents had been found in a garage at Biden's home in Wilmington, as well as in an adjacent room. And the president's public comments produced more questions than answers.
Classified material next to your Corvette, what were you thinking?
I'm going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay, so it's not like you're sitting out in the street.
So the material was in a locked garage?
Yes, as well as my Corvette. But as I said earlier this week, people know I take classified documents and classified material seriously.
Then on Saturday, President Biden's personal attorney released a revised timeline of all the events involving these classified documents. So it begins on November 2nd. That's when the president's personal attorneys discovered some Obama-Biden documents at a private office Biden used after his time as vice president. They informed the National Archives. November 4th, the National Archives Inspector General informs the Justice Department. December 20th, the president's attorneys identified what they call a small number of documents with classified markings in Biden's Wilmington garage. Then this past Wednesday, Biden's attorneys located yet another classified document at the Wilmington residence inside a room adjacent to that garage. Then on Thursday, still more classified material was found in that same room and delivered to the Justice Department. Now, the White House has reported that the 5 new classified pages were found on Saturday. It's worth noting that it was in the middle of all of this, on November 18th, that Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed the special counsel to investigate Donald Trump. And that's 14 days after the Justice Department was notified by the archives of the found Biden documents. The facts surrounding the Biden and Trump special counsels are significantly different legally. The special counsel investigating Trump is also looking into his role in the January 6th insurrection. But politically, just the presence of the files at Biden's private office and his Delaware home have delivered Donald Trump and Republicans both a political gift and, for Trump specifically, perhaps a legal gift as well, by threatening to muddy the waters with voters and with folks at the Justice Department concerned about his mishandling of classified documents. And statements like this one from Biden that would criticize Trump back in September do not help Biden's cause.
How that could possibly happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
Now, it's worth noting there's one giant difference between these two investigations. President Trump actively defied a subpoena, and his lawyer lied on a federal form regarding the return of those classified documents. There was no subpoena in Biden's case. But Biden campaigned and was elected, asking to be held to a higher standard to restore integrity back to the executive branch. These twin special counsel investigations also remind us of just how intertwined Biden and Trump are. Biden wouldn't be president today without Trump's 2016 victory. And Biden's viability as a candidate in 2024 may depend heavily on Trump. Biden's political flaws, his age, his verbal gaffes, his family baggage, all were minimized in 2020 because of the comparison to Donald Trump and his flaws. And it now means the single most powerful person in the 2024 campaign may be the current Attorney General, Merrick Garland. And for the record, here's the public rationale the Attorney General used in appointing each of those two special counsels.
Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for president in the next election, and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel. I strongly believe that the normal processes of this department can handle all investigations with integrity. But under the regulations, the extraordinary circumstances here require the appointment of a special counsel for this matter.
And joining me now is the former Deputy Attorney General under President Trump, Rod Rosenstein. The newly appointed special counsel and looking into Biden, Robert Hur, served as Rosenstein's top aide at the Justice Department, overseeing the special counsel investigation into the Russian election interference. Mr. Rosenstein, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Chuck.
In December, after the appointment of the Trump special counsel, when asked whether you would have done it, you said you probably wouldn't have. How about this Biden special counsel?
I think, Chuck, having made the appointment in the Trump case, Merrick Garland put himself in a position where he really had no choice when this matter came along, unless the preliminary inquiry were to establish that there was no chance that a crime had been committed. And according to what we've heard, John Lausch did not make that decision.
Do you believe that appointing a special counsel strengthens the Trump special counsel and strengthens their ability to come to different conclusions, or does it muddy the waters?
I think, Chuck, you have to differentiate between the political consequences and the practical consequences for the special counsel. For Jack Smith and Rob Hur, they're conducting independent investigations. Mm-hmm. They're going to go evaluate the facts in the law, make their recommendation based upon what they find. So I don't anticipate that the existence of two special counsels is going to influence the way either one of them goes about their job.
To the public, it appears I had somebody use this metaphor with me, and I want to use it. There are two car wrecks. One clearly is an accident. One appears to be intentional. Is that a fair way to look at these two classified document situations?
I think, Chuck, we should wait until we know the facts. You know, the key fact with regard to the Biden documents, of course, is what did the president know about those documents? Was he aware that they'd been moved? Did he, in any case, in the past 5 years, has he handled those documents? Was he aware of them? We just don't know that yet. So I think given that, we really can't speculate just based on what's in the public record.
Tell me your confidence level in Jack Smith and in Robert Hur.
Well, these are two professionals who spent extended amounts of time in the Department of Justice. They understand that their goal is to focus on the facts and the law and apply department policy. And both of these men are not going to be influenced by political pressure.
You feel like they're both, you said something intriguing to me. You said, you know, every special counsel starts with sterling credentials, and then the public gets a hold of them. But would you say that's the case with both of these gentlemen?
It's certainly true of these gentlemen, as it was with people like Ken Starr and Bob Mueller, that you pick people with sterling reputations who are known for being nonpartisan. But you're in a political arena where it's inevitable you're going to be attacked.
There's two sort of unique defenses in each of these cases that I'm curious your take on. One is Donald Trump's claim that he could declassify anything he wanted. Now, he's not made a legal claim that he did that. And the second is, Joe Biden's currently president. So is it currently illegal for him to have classified documents in his possession, even if it's at his home next to his Corvette?
Right. Well, that's one of the questions the special counsel will have to look into. And in addition, the legal status of the vice president, whether or not he has authority to make any declassification decisions. But the key question, the threshold question here is going to be, was President Biden aware of those classified documents?
And how does that get proven? You think he's going to have to sit for an interview?
Well, that would be a logical step. If I were conducting this investigation, I want to go right to the source and ask the president directly whether or not he was aware of those documents.
How a sitting president can't be indicted according to Justice Department. So let's say something is found. What would happen?
Chuck, I think what should happen in a special counsel investigation is that the special counsel should evaluate the facts and the law, look at Department of Justice policies, and make a recommendation to the Attorney General about whether or not prosecution is warranted. Then it's up to the Attorney General to make the decision whether to apply that DOJ policy.
All right. If you have been in this similar situation, it's November 4th. It's 4 days before the elections. The National Archives informs you that, hey, the Biden, President Biden has just turned over some classified documents that he had in his possession. Is it too close to the election to tell people? Is that why the Justice Department didn't inform folks publicly? Is it too soon? Are there questions that should be raised about this or not?
Chuck, it's not the Justice Department's job to make public announcements like that. The decision about whether or not to go public would be left to the President and the White House. So I would not anticipate the Justice Department under any circumstances to make a public announcement about something like that.
You wouldn't have done that in that similar situation?
In the Justice Department, I would not have publicized it, no.
I am curious, there's a lot of new committees on the Hill that want to investigate some Justice Department practices, and some of these aren't for current investigations. You essentially said, no, when you were there and others, you didn't turn stuff over to Congress in active investigations. Do you expect Merrick Garland to do the same?
I think the bright line, Chuck, is not to turn over anything that's going to in any way interfere with the investigation. So that's a decision the department needs to make in addressing each request as it comes along. There are legitimate congressional oversight requirements that the department can accommodate. But there really is a bright line when it comes to anything that might interfere with the investigation.
So the fact that they have already sent letters demanding certain things now, in your mind, there's nothing Justice can do until they're done with this investigation, correct?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, there are, as I said, legitimate oversight issues that can be resolved without interfering with the investigation. So, for example, one bright line would be investigating the prosecutor while the case is ongoing. I think that's the place where the department would need to draw a line.
Let's go back in time. In hindsight, was doing special counsels, is this the slippery slope that many previous attorneys generals has always feared, that once you appoint one, you essentially can't stop appointing them? Once you claim there's a rationale of a perception of unfairness, aren't you stuck basically appointing them throughout the rest of the term?
That was true, Chuck, under the independent counsel statute, where there was actually a statutory obligation to appoint an independent counsel. It's not true under the special counsel guidelines. It's always left to the discretion of the Attorney General to decide whether the public interest warrants it in that particular case. So I do think, when you've got a similar case as you do with the Trump and Biden documents, that you have established a precedent. But I don't know that you need to apply that universally.
I asked that because a decision was made last year not to appoint a special counsel in the Hunter Biden investigation. But now he has appointed a special counsel to look into Joe Biden and these classified documents. Merrick Garland made the decision to put both January 6th and the classified documents under the umbrella of one special counsel. Is he going to be forced to do the same thing with Hunter Biden?
Well, I think you need to distinguish Hunter Biden from President Biden. We don't know whether that Hunter Biden case implicates the president in any wrongdoing. If it did, I think Merrick Garland would need to make that decision. But as long as it's just about Hunter Biden, I don't think that decision point will be reached.
There's a lot of criticism on Capitol Hill of the FBI. You work pretty closely with Christopher Wray. What say you about Christopher Wray?
I think Christopher Wray is doing a superb job under very challenging circumstances. This criticism of the FBI has been ongoing for some time. But if you look at the work the Bureau is doing on a day-to-day basis, I think the American people should have confidence in what they're doing. And I think Chris Wray is the right person to be in that job now.
Judging by our political climate of the last decade, do we have to figure out another way to politically appoint members of the Justice Department? Or do you think we can get through this moment?
I don't think there's any reason to mess with the appointment process, Chuck. You know, the majority of employees of the department are career employees. The leadership is subject to political appointment, and I think that that's an appropriate way to manage the department.
All right. Rod Rosenstein, former Deputy Attorney General who's seen his share of special counsels and has been through this. Appreciate you coming on and lending your perspective to this. And joining me now is Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. He's the top Republican on the Homeland Security Committee's Subcommittee on Investigations. Senator Johnson, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Well, Chuck, it's been a while.
It has. Let me start with, do you approve of Merrick Garland's decision to appoint a special counsel to look into the Joe Biden classified documents?
Well, I guess because he assigned one to President Trump, it was pretty inevitable. I'm not a real fan of special counsels. I did join 32 of my colleagues in calling for one for Hunter Biden because we had a whistleblower that said that Attorney Weiss doesn't have the resources to do the type of investigation required. So, but in general, I'm not a fan of special counsels. I think the way we handle these investigations of wrongdoing, I'll call it that, in the political realm is we just do it completely backwards. I think Congress ought to be able to have access to all the information, do their oversight. I never held public hearings. We just, did our investigation, then issued a report. If there's evidence of wrongdoing, then we should refer that to the Justice Department. Then the investigation should take place. What happens nowadays is the investigation begins, Congress never gets access to the information, and as a result, the American public never understands the truth of these situations. And so, again, we just do these investigations in the political realm with wrongdoing completely backwards.
So do you think, though, that, Congress has an oversight role. So shouldn't Congress do their oversight role after an investigation is over? If doing it during the investigation, doesn't that end up either on purpose or inadvertently interfere in the investigation?
The problem is Congress never gets access to the information. And by the time we do get access to the information, if we do, it's all old news. And the political figures aren't held accountable. And from my standpoint, I'd much rather have political figures held accountable with the truth being exposed of what they did, what they're wrongdoing, as opposed to the criminal penalties. Oftentimes, it's very difficult to get any kind of criminal charges or convictions, particularly if you're a Democrat in Washington, D.C. So from my standpoint, the more important imperative here is for the public to understand exactly what is happening inside government, inside the administration, and we never find that out. And so that is part of the problem we have in terms of our politics today is the American public remains in the dark. Misinformation is spread on all sides. And certainly from a conservative viewpoint, one of our frustrations is the censorship of the suppression of information primarily is coming from the left against the conservative viewpoint. So
I guess the problem that I feel like you run into with that decision is what you're saying is if the Justice Department decides a crime wasn't committed, they're not going to prosecute a crime, it sounds like you still want the information out there because you want to politically damage the person that was investigated?
No, Chuck, because a lot of political wrongdoing does not necessarily result in a crime, but it's still wrong. And the public needs to understand exactly what happened. So, take a look at the political wrongdoing on the part of the FBI. They went to Twitter and they were censoring information. Take a look at the 51 intelligence operatives that issued a letter saying that the Hunter Biden computer had all the earmarks of a Russian information operation. That letter was an information operation. What happened? The FBI had access to Hunter Biden's computer in December 2019. Senator Grassley and I were conducting an investigation during COVID, not the easiest thing to do. We were smeared. There were false intelligence products leaked to the media. We got unsolicited briefings from the FBI designed to smear me because they leaked it later. The FBI spent almost 9 months setting up the ability to sabotage the Hunter Biden computer should it ever surface, which it did the day after. We were offered Hunter Biden's computer the day after Chuck Grassley and I issued our report, but we did our due diligence. We went to the FBI. What do you know about this? They never came clean with us Mr. McIsaac ended up getting frustrated and offered that to Rudy Giuliani's computer and then, or to his attorney, and then to the New York Post. But again, 9 months of the FBI setting up the process of sabotaging Hunter Biden's computer, which we now know is authentic. Our investigation was accurate, but we were smeared. All that information was censored and suppressed, and the FBI, in their actions, impacted the election to a far greater extent anything that Russia or China ever could have hoped to accomplish. These are facts. And that's all I'm interested in. I'm interested in the truth, and I think the American public deserves the truth. And again, these investigations, they cover up the truth.
Senator, do you have a crime that you think Hunter Biden committed? Because I've yet to see anybody explain it is not a crime to make money off your last name.
So, Chuck, you ought to read the Marco Polo report, where they detail all kinds of potential crimes. You know, Senator Grass and I certainly
let me just stop you there. Potential. Potential is innuendo.
About $30,000.
That's why you do investigation.
I mean, Chuck, is it a crime to be soliciting and purchasing prostitution in potentially European sex trafficking operations? Is that a crime? Because Chuck Grass and I laid out about $30,000 paid by Hunter Biden to those types of individuals over December 2018, 2019, about $30,000. This is about the same time that President Biden offered to pay about $100,000 of Hunter Biden's bills. I mean, again, that's just some information. I don't know exactly.
Here's what I don't get. All right, Senator.
It doesn't really look on the. It sounds sleazy, as you know.
I'll take you at your word that you're ethically bothered by Hunter Biden. I'm curious, though. You seem to have a pattern.
Are you not?
I seem to have a pattern. I'm a journalist. I have to deal in facts.
Are you not?
I deal in facts. It says, Senator, my question to you is, I'm always worried. I have skepticism of both parties. I sit here with skepticism of a lot of people's work. And I'm curious, were you at all concerned? Your Senate Democrats want to investigate Jared Kushner's loan from the Qatari government when he was working in the government negotiating many things in the Middle East. Are you not concerned about that? And I say that because it seems to me if you're concerned about what Hunter Biden did, you should be equally outraged about what Jared Kushner did.
I'm concerned about getting the truth. I don't target individuals.
You don't? You're targeting Hunter Biden multiple times on this show, Senator. You're targeting an individual.
Chuck, my concern, Chuck. You know, part of the problem, and this is pretty obvious to anybody watching this, is you don't invite me on to interview me. You invite me on to argue with me. You know, I'm just trying to lay out the facts that certainly Senator Grass and I uncovered. They were suppressed. They were censored. They interfered in the 2020 election. Conservatives understand that. Unfortunately, liberals in the media don't. And that's part of the things that part of the reasons our politics are inflamed is we do not have an unbiased media. We don't. It's unfortunate. I'm all for a free press. It needs to be more unbiased.
Senator,
there's misinformation on both sides, but the censorship and suppression
we're trying to do issues here in
from the left.
Partisan cable. Look, you can go back on your partisan cable cocoon and talk about media bias all you want. I understand it's part of your identity. Let me move to what happened in Brazil. And I want to play something that former Vice President Mike Pence said about what happened in Brazil. It is evident that what happens in the United States has repercussions around the world. I have no doubt that that tragic day in January of 2021 in this country played some role in sowing the seeds of what's taking place in Brazil. Do you agree with Mike Pence?
I don't know. Did the 570 riots during the summer of 2020 play some part? I have no idea what the connection is. But again,
armed
Chuck,
insurrectionists attacking Congress,
example
Steve Bannon, the Trump.
Of what frustrates conservatives about the media.
You don't see any connection here at all?
You know, Chuck, Brazil is Brazil. There are issues in terms of election fairness in every election. So I can't really comment on Brazil, and this is just again, I'm not making any connection.
I'm curious when it comes to that brief moment where you were handed the potential of alternative electors, and you say it was a brief moment.
I wasn't.
Are you being?
I wasn't. That's false. I was never handed. That's not.
I know you weren't handed
incorrect.
it. They were asking to hand it to you, and you were obviously contemplating it. And obviously,
Chuck,
your staffer was dealing with it.
No, Chuck, I never was. I was contacted by the attorney of the President of the United States. He had something he wanted to deliver to the Vice President. Could I arrange it? So I contacted my chief of staff, who worked in the White House, see if he could do it. I had no idea what they wanted to hand to the President or the Vice President. Within an hour, we found out the Vice President wasn't accepting anything. End of story. Nothing was delivered. I had no idea what I was being contacted to deliver, and we never delivered it.
Have you been interviewed?
There's no story there. There never was a story there, and everything I've always said about that has proven to be true, even though the media lied about it.
Have you been interviewed by the FBI or the special counsel's office investigating the alternative electors?
No, there is nothing to interview me about. I played no role in it whatsoever.
Do you know why Congressman Kelly thought you were going to be the best person to hand these slate of electors to?
I have no idea, but remember, Congressman Kelly denied initially that his office was involved in trying to get that information to the Vice President. I told the truth about that. He lied about it, and I was smeared for about a week and a half. And
meaning
by the way,
the congressman, you believe the congressman lied to you or lied about your role?
He lied about his non-role. His office did play a role in this. That's what I suspected. Again, this was such a non-event for me. I had a hard time. We had to go back and really scour our records to find out what happened. And Chuck, you started this questioning falsely. You falsely accused me of getting those, and I never took possession. I never had them. Okay. So again, this has been a complete smear job against me.
Well,
the January 6th committee did not do their due diligence like Chuck Grassley and I did during our.
You dabbled in so much of this. Do you understand why somebody might have thought you were willing to go along with this scheme?
I did not dabble in very much of this. It's just false. I held a hearing in December 2020 examining the irregularities of the 2020 election. What you ought to do is go back and read my opening statement, and that pretty well lays out exactly what I thought about the 2020 election. But the news media never does that. They smear me, they lie about me, they make these things up, and then that becomes the narrative. It's a false narrative. Most of the things everything I've said that I'm aware of has panned out to be true. The things I'm accused of providing misinformation have been true, time and time again. I'm happy to come on in a longer format, and we can go over this point by point.
Well, as I've always said, look, remote interviews,
every lie told about me.
Remote interviews are never easy when there's a back and forth, and that I think that is a fact for a lot of folks.
Have me in studio. I'm happy to do it.
We would love to have you in studio. Always want you here. Last question: Donald Trump's been a candidate for office for a couple of months. You have not endorsed him. Do you plan on it?
I don't endorse candidates. I let the voters decide that. I don't make endorsements.
You're not going to endorse anybody in the presidential race?
I don't make endorsements.
All right. Senator Ron Johnson, I look forward to our face-to-face at some point. Thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective with us.
So do I.
When we come back, I'm going to talk with retiring Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan as Democrats struggle to defend the leader of their party. Welcome back. Democrats are facing a daunting Senate map in 2024, having to defend 23 seats. That's nearly half of the entire conference. Remember, they only have 51 seats. Compared with just 11 for Senate Republicans. Democrats are already bracing for challenges to incumbents in some Republican-leaning states like West Virginia, Montana, and Ohio. And now, Michigan Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow has become the first Democrat on that side of the aisle. Now she will not seek re-election. It sets the stage for another very competitive race and perhaps one of the most important battleground states in not just the presidential race, but in every race that we deal with. Well, Senator Stabenow is also number 3 in Democratic Senate leadership. Senator Stabenow, welcome back to Meet the Press. Or welcome to Meet the Press. Sorry.
Well, Chuck, it's great to be with you.
Let me start with what we've been dealing with President Biden and these classified documents. When you look at the timeline, and it feels like a drip, 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 how concerned are you that perhaps the White House is holding back information a bit too much, leaving other Democrats out there like yourself not knowing what to defend and what not to defend?
Well, Chuck, a little while ago, I heard you say that someone described it as 2 car accidents, one that was an accident and the other on purpose. This is very much about how it's being handled. And so President Biden bringing things forward. They found a small number of documents. They want to make sure there aren't more. They take it very, very seriously. And they're talking to all of the right people. They're not going to defy subpoenas or require FBI raids to be able to get the documents. But the president isn't saying that somehow magically, when he thinks about classified documents, that he can declassify them. I mean, it's totally different right now. Both serious in terms of having classified documents, but the president is doing the right thing.
You know, the president said what Donald Trump did was careless. Are those words he has to eat? Are those words he has to eat, basically, is to admit he was wrong?
I lost you there for a second.
That's okay. He said what Donald Trump did was careless.
I'm sorry.
He said what Donald Trump did was careless. Does he have to eat those words considering what happened with him?
Well, it's certainly embarrassing, right? I mean, it's embarrassing that you would find a small number of documents, certainly not on purpose. They don't think it's the right thing, and they have been moving to correct it, working with the Department of Justice, working with everyone involved, with the archives. And so from my perspective, you know, it's one of those moments that obviously they wish hadn't happened. But what I'm most concerned about, and this is the kind of thing that the Republicans love. We just heard it from my colleague, Senator Johnson. Let's talk about investigations. Let's create chaos. Let's not talk about the fact that we have a manufacturing renaissance going on in this country, more jobs created, lower unemployment rate, higher wages, and what they're proposing to do that would interfere with that, would really put us on the edge economically. They don't want to talk with us about how to move the country forward. And I can tell you, people in Michigan, they want folks that are going to work together, get things done, that care about their families, and aren't interested in all of this just chaos and investigations, and which is where the Republicans feel comfortable, unfortunately.
Listen, you announced your retirement early, which means, in theory, this means you're free from politics. So, what freedom, now that you don't have to worry about re-election, is there a specific issue you think you can throw yourself into now that might have been more politically difficult if you were seeking re-election?
Well, Chuck, good question. You know, first of all, I have to say we have a wonderful Democratic bunch of new leaders in Michigan. This is the moment for me to really pass the torch and have great confidence in them, and comes at a personal time for me with my 96-year-old mom. That's important for me to make a transition. When we look at the issues, I have been able to work across the aisle on issue after issue after issue to get things done, which I'm going to continue to do. The big issue that has bipartisan support to actually get done this next year is what we call the Farm Bill. I chair the Agriculture Committee. This is the 5-year Farm Bill. It's about a safety net for farmers and families. It's the largest investment we make in land and water conservation for the country. And so that's incredibly important. And frankly, we need workers. And one of the things we need to do is comprehensive immigration reform, so that our farmers have access to a legal system for their workers.
You have had the luxury of working in the one area where everybody actually wants to see a bill passed, and that is that Farm Bill. That is the one area there's usually bipartisan support. Let me ask you a few political questions here. Should Democrats support Kyrsten Sinema's re-election bid?
Well, from my perspective, we let it play out on what's going to happen in Arizona. Kyrsten and I have worked together on many issues, and from when we look at the gun safety bill, when we look at the comprehensive transformational changes in mental health in that bill, she was key to that. And so we'll let that play out a bit, but I'm glad that she's working with us and caucusing with us.
So there is a scenario where you think Democrats should support a re-election?
We'll see going down the road how all of this plays out. I think it's very, very early.
A lot of people think Washington and Congress specifically is broken, that the Senate is broken. Do you share that, or do you think this is just a temporary problem?
I think it's a very interesting situation, Chuck, because on the one hand, we see all the division and chaos and everything that's happening to try to pull the country apart, stop us from governing, when we see the attack on January 6th and so on. But with all of that, we actually, in the last 2 years, with a 50-50 Senate, you don't get closer than 50-50 in the United States Senate. Nope. Democratic House and President Biden got more done than at any time, literally in our lifetimes. And that's not an exaggeration. And so, from my perspective, I mean, the reason we won last time when everybody said we would lose the majority and we actually picked up a seat, the reason we will have the majority next time is because we are actually focusing on the things that people care about, putting them first, working across the aisle. When you can't, we stand up to Big Pharma and Big Oil. That's why we have a $35 cap on insulin for seniors starting this month. We would have had it for kids and everybody if the Republicans hadn't blocked it because they're so close to Big Pharma. So that's what we're focused on. And every single one of my colleagues up for re-election has strongly represented their state, stood up for people. And I'm confident that we're going to have the majority in 2024.
I imagine we'll be talking over the next 2 years, and we'll see if your optimism holds. Senator Debbie Stabenow, thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective. Up next,
absolutely,
Washington. How paralyzed by scandal will it become? With dueling special counsel investigations, a divided government, that debt ceiling showdown. Can anything get done this year? Panelists next. Welcome back, panelists here. NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson, anchor of Hallie Jackson Now on NBC News Now. Mark Short, former chief of staff to former Vice President Mike Pence. And the Reverend Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation on MSNBC and the president of the National Action Network. Hallie, I used the cliche at the beginning. We always say, a week is a lifetime in politics. Holy cow.
We've all aged a decade, yes.
Everything feels like, well, everything we thought we knew literally a week ago at this time about the craziness in the House Republican side, Biden looking like he was above the fray. It's all done. It's all changed.
So, and it was interesting to me to hear your conversation with Senator Stabenow when you asked her about some Democratic frustration with the way that this has gone, with the president, with the way that the White House has handled the transparency issue on these documents, that she pivoted right away to say, well, the line that we keep hearing from the White House, inadvertent, and we told them right away, right? Because that speaks to the intent issue. Let me tell you what I'm hearing just last night and having some conversations with allies of President Biden. Heard an F-bomb, heard somebody describe themselves as pretty pissed, drip, drip, drip. Amateur hour at the White House from one member who is extremely frustrated with the way, not the issue itself, right? Not the underlying issue, but with the way that this has been handled, pointing to the fact that, listen, Republicans just spent the last week, right, a week ago, which also felt like an eternity the week before, struggling to simply elect a Speaker of the House. This should have been a week where Democrats were on offense, and instead they are way on defense.
You're going to be with the president tomorrow. You going to say anything to him?
I'm going to say Happy King Day, but aside from that, no, I think that this has been handled in a way that's embarrassing. I think Senator Stabenow said. But I think that the Republicans ought to be careful that this does not politically start turning against them, in the sense that as you continue to compare what Trump did and what Biden did around classified documents, it can really end up being something that Biden's base can become energized by, because a lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, this only spells out more clearly how egregious what Trump did was.
Mark, what do you think this means for Trump?
I think that it's impossible for the Biden administration to prosecute Trump at this point. I think what Americans are frustrated about is the continued double standard that they see at Department of Justice, and I don't see how they would continue forward.
Do you think Garland at least attempted to, do you think he's doing his best to try to essentially push back at that narrative?
Oh, I don't know. I think the reality is that the facts here is that they discovered this in November. Why did they hold it? Why didn't anybody talk about it? Is it because of the midterm elections they didn't want to interfere with? And this was 6 years ago. This wasn't from his time as president, from his time as vice president of the United States. It's like the Biden administration decided the 12 days of Christmas weren't enough for Republicans. They want to keep it going as long as they can.
Hallie, it does seem as if it matters what these documents are, doesn't it? That might matter.
Oh, for sure. And I think that matters on both sides of the aisle. The key thing that I keep hearing in conversations over the last even 24 hours is what matters is national security, right? And I think there is an acknowledgement. And frankly, I don't know that there is unanimity in the Republican Party. I've had conversations with at least one Republican member who said, hey, like, I'm not going to get on Joe Biden for self-reporting here. Like, we should be encouraging that, right? People to come forward if they do, setting aside the issue of the transparency thing and how they responded, et cetera. But you are going to continue to see more investigations. I think you will try to see Republicans seek to link these investigations to other investigations. Like, for example, is there some Hunter Biden connection, et cetera? That's something that is.
Well, I would think the fear is, Reverend Sharpton, is that somehow Garland decides, I better move Hunter Biden into a special counsel at this point. Right?
I think that becomes the fear, but I think, again, you'd have to deal with whether Hunter Biden, any of these allegations, even involves the president and how that plays out. If it does not involve the president, I think it becomes a different ball game as to why he would even entertain that. But I think the real problem here, it goes to intent. And I think that is where the Republicans are going to have a problem.
Mark, you have a vested interest in how this sort of impacts the 2023 version of the presidential race, right? The sort of the invisible primary part. How do you think both of these investigations, does it paralyze things? Does it slow announcements down? What's your sense?
I honestly don't think it does impact much of the 23-24 cycle. I do think there's a lot of other reasons that is probably frozen where it is right now. But I do think that, it's an indication of how seriously the Biden administration takes it. I don't know if having your classified documents next to your Corvette somehow makes it safer. Yeah. But the fact that the very next day, Janet Yellen is putting out warning signs about the debt ceiling, when most of us anticipated that was going to happen much later, months from now, I think there's a clear indication they're definitely trying to change the topic.
Hallie, that felt a bit clumsy. Though, I mean, it felt pretty obvious to me what they were trying to do. Well, quickly, let's do a narrative that they don't like.
At the same time, there's a real concern about that, right? I mean, like
in June.
Yeah, right. But like also, you got to start. What I've heard is you got to start thinking about and working on that now, so that when it comes to June, it's not a complete, hot mess, if you will.
Very quickly, Mike Pence pretty definitive on calling what Brazil did basically an homage to January 6th. Pretty concerning to him.
Well, Chuck, I think if you recall on that day when the Secret Service tried to evacuate him, the reason he said, I'm not going to evacuate is because I don't want the world to see this is what happens to the hallmark of democracy. It's why he stayed in the Capitol that day. And it's why, if you continue that interview, he also said what he was pleased about is the world saw America complete its business that night and make sure we protect democracy that day, too.
Speaking of protecting democracy, it's King Day tomorrow. And this year is the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. You've got something you're up to.
Tomorrow we'll be announcing at our annual National Action Network King Day breakfast here in Washington that President Biden is the keynote speaker, that we're going to call for a March on Washington since 60th anniversary. Martin Luther King III, Andrea King, and I, National Action Network and Drum Major Institute. We've seen a spike in hate crimes against blacks, against Jews, against Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, unlike we've seen in the last couple of decades. And we want to have a unified march against hate crimes, against those that should enforce the criminality of it, and show a real unison among different groups that have become the victims.
So you're hoping to make this multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious,
Absolutely.
You name it, right?
Across the board, which was Dr. King's dream. We really need to deal with hate crime, and we need to really deal with the lack of equality on how we prosecute them.
I'm going to pause it there. Reverend Sharpton, thank you for that. When we come back, COVID cases are rising right now across the U.S. We're going to look inside the latest numbers, what the nation's political divide reveals about who is not getting the new updated vaccine. Welcome back. Data download time. The calendar has flipped to January, and the weather has turned cold in most of the country. For the past 2 years, that's meant a COVID spike was imminent. Why? Because people go inside. So, is the same true for 2023? Let me show you. We do have an uptick. Over the last 90 days, it's pretty clear we've seen an uptick in cases, about 30%, as you can see. And for what it's worth, when you're looking at the raw numbers, most people aren't testing as much as they used to. Mandatory testing is down. So this is all a floor, but there is some apples to apples here since testing had started to lighten up last summer. Now, if you compare now, though, to a year ago, we're actually in terrific shape because this is where we were in January 2022 when it came to coronavirus cases. Here we are a year later. Yes, it's up right now, but overall, from year to year, it is down. Even weekly coronavirus deaths. Again, you saw the big spikes that we had at the start of 2022 We're seeing a spike here, but far below where we were. Another interesting point we want to point out has to do with vaccine and the booster. The updated booster among those over the age of 65 does not have a lot of traction. Less than 40% of those over 65 have done the updated booster. Compare that to the initial vaccine series. 94% of those over 65 took it. Look at where we are today. That's not good when it comes to seeing where this virus is going to go. And if you want to look at it, here's our old political map. These are the states where those over 65 are above the national average. Look at how blue those states are. Joe Biden carried more than half of them. Now, if you look at the states that are below the national average of taking that updated booster shot among those over 65, yep, it won't surprise you. They're mostly Trump states, mostly red. So we still have that awful political divide among folks over 65 when it comes to vaccines. Up next, in our Meet the Press Minute, we're going to hear from the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. when he was on this program in 1966 and what he had to say about the value of nonviolent protests. Welcome back. This weekend, we honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who appeared on this program 5 times during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. In 1966, on this program, he responded to criticism that protests were becoming violent and counterproductive in the fight for racial justice.
It is very important to see the difference between nonviolent demonstrations and riots. It may be true that in a demonstration, people react with violence toward nonviolent demonstrators, but you don't blame the demonstrators. This would be like blaming the robbed man because his possession of money precipitated the evil act of robbery. Ultimately, society must condemn the robber and not the robbed. It must protect the robbed. And this is where we are in these demonstrations, and I'm still convinced that there is nothing more powerful to dramatize a social evil than the tramp of marching feet.
And before we go, please sign up for our free daily newsletter, First Read. You'll get the best analysis, polling, and political news every morning. Wisdom before it's conventional. Scan the QR code on screen right now, or just go to NBCnews.com/firstread. That's all we got for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.